أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Since the last discussion we had, there's a lot that's been happening in Palestine, and one of the big events that happened in the last few days was the talk by Sayyid Hassan, and that was something that everybody was looking forward to. And we were expecting to hear something special. We were here to see some turn of events. Now, there's a lot that Sayyid Hassan discussed in his speech, and inshallah today we want to analyze some of these things and also talk about the recent events since our last discussion. So alhamdulillah, today we have with us Sheikh Kadhim Bojani again and Sheikh Muhammad Baqir with us. Alhamdulillah, it's a blessing to be discussing with them, and inshallah we'll get some good insight on this topic. So to get started, I want to first understand and get to understand why is it that Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah's speech was such an important thing. Sheikh Baqir, if you'd like to get us started with that.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you for hosting us at this event. If I was to quickly come up with a small analogy, so when it comes to social issues, when it comes to analyzing different issues that happen on ground at different areas of the world, analysts come up with this example that imagine you're living in a forest, you're living in a jungle, and then you can be analyzing the events in a jungle from three different perspectives or from three different views. Yeah? You have the people who are living in a jungle. So let's say you could have Shias and Sunnis, for example. You could have, for example, Pakistanis and Indians, for example. Right? You could have white Americans, and you could have African Americans, for example, right? So you could have different people on at the forest level, and you could have fights between these people, right? Now, someone could be analyzing these events from this perspective, living in the forest, and then saying, "Oh, you know, these many trees were burned, these many houses were attacked, these many people were killed." Okay, it's a very ground level analysis. The information is important. You understand what the people are going through, but it's limited to a certain region in the forest. Then you have a level where you're looking at the entire forest. What are the different regions? What are the different areas in the forest? The different territories in the forest? What are the people up to, right? What happens when these two tribes, for example, or these two regions or these two ethnicities fight? What happens to other regions in the forest, right? So you have a ground up. You have like an eagle view, right? And then a hawk eye view, sorry. Okay, and then you have something even beyond that, which is like you're looking at the entire world, for example, right? So now analysts, they say that Sayyid Hassan is at least someone who's looking at this issue from a level 2 perspective, if not a level 3 perspective. So he's not right in the middle of the fight, the protest, the issues, the skirmishes, the conflict. He's not there, obviously. He's someone who is at a leading position at level 2. So he's looking at the entire region, he's looking at the entire territory, and then he's looking at the different moves that are being made, and then he's got a hand in the different moves that are happening. So this makes him very important.
And I guess at that level, the thing that gives him a lot of value is the fact that the information he has, the understanding he has of the overall picture, like as a person, he has a good understanding of things.
So the view that he has, and then add to that his position. If he was just a reporter, for example, looking at that perspective, of course he has a very good understanding of things. But then when you put someone at that position, he's leading one of the important groups out there. That group itself has stakes in this conflict, right? They're involved, but again, he's not the one directly on ground. He's looking from outside, so he has a very strong understanding of the entire issue.
And the fact that he's one of the leaders of the resistance movement makes his word, like everybody's looking forward to what is he going to say, because it's going to impact on what's going to happen. So Sheikh, one of the things that keep coming to mind, and I've seen these comments many times, is that if we were expecting Sayyid Hassan to come and start something big, you know, he came and gave a speech and then that's it, and the next thing we know is another ambulance was attacked. So what real impact did the speech have?
So I think I'll continue with what Sheikh Baqir mentioned, that what he was trying to do in the speech was to give that bigger picture, what's happening in the region, and especially the important part of speech was the Lebanese stance, which means the stance of the resistance in Lebanon. So that he put forward very clearly. And there's a lot of detail. I just want to, because this is an important question, and I want to quote a passage from one of the analysts, because we look at these analysts and see what they say. So this is a very senior Indian ex-diplomat who writes about these topics. So in one of his pieces, his article, he says that exactly the same emotion as you conveyed. Nasrallah's speech was keenly awaited in world capitals, principally for any clues on Hezbollah's intentions going forward. Everybody is waiting that maybe he's going to like show like an attack on live like he did last time. What are they going to do? But look what he says. But the master tactician instead focused on the bigger picture. For as he put it, October 7 heralds a changed landscape necessitating a shared responsibility from all parties. This is a quote from Sayyid Hassan, that he instead focused on the bigger picture. The question still remains that why though? Okay. For this, we need to go back to the precedents and what he has been doing in these speeches. So whenever Sayyid Hassan gives a speech, or a leader of his stature gives a speech, at times it might include things to do with that actual, as Sheikh mentioned, what's happening in the forest, what's happening in that actual like conflict or that moment. But many times he comes with two main things that he does in his speeches. One is he's speaking to his own audience, which is the Mu'mineen, the believers, the resistance fighters, everybody around the world, or everyone who supports the oppressed. He's speaking to people who can have a positive contribution, and which he did. And he mentioned very important points. And in that also, one of the things he always does is to present the right narrative and what's actually happening, the right analysis. Especially we live in a world of battle of narratives. The media plays an important role shaping our understanding and what narrative is accepted by people, and that has impact on the conflict.
I guess that in itself is important, even if Sayyid Hassan would just come and explain things from the perspective of the resistance. Even that in itself is quite valuable, right? Because we don't have that perspective anywhere else in the news.
So that's one thing. The second thing is that he uses this speech to give messages to the enemy. So he's also speaking to the enemy and is giving his kind of like warnings, threats. And the third thing, I think what Sayyid Hassan has decided to, the approach is decided to take is that it's called the strategy of confusion. Not letting the enemy know what exactly your next moves are. So even this fact that it's been more than 3 weeks into this current episode and he hasn't spoken, and this was his first speech, was noted by many analysts around the world, and they're saying that he's not letting the other side know what exactly he's thinking. He just mentioned in this speech that all options are available. We are ready for all the scenarios that might come. So even it seems that with this speech, he continued this same strategy where he didn't give any clue of what Hezbollah on ground in the forest, as you mentioned, is trying to do. He gave some clues of the general strategy of the resistance, but he spent a good portion on explaining the people and giving messages to the other side as well.
Okay, so one can, so you're suggesting this is a tactic, this is a strategy. From another perspective, we could call this just talk. Is it just psychological warfare? You know, in the olden times, Arabs would come and recite poetry, you know, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But nothing actually happens, right? So can we not say, maybe, you know, they're not acting? And we've seen this a lot in the past. So we've had a lot of statements, even from Iran, statements that come, you know, threat. If you do one more thing, we'll attack you. From that side, if you do one, but we never see it coming. So can you like shed a light on this?
Okay. So this first point, I'm not going to deny this, obviously. The fact that war, conflict is all about, like, you have a level of psychological warfare at any of these levels, right?
So you're saying it's fair enough to have that. That's a good
It is
objective.
a part of it. I'm not saying this is the only thing out there, but exactly. this is key, right? We know when you have battles, when you had that one-on-one warfare, you'd recite the rajas, the eulogy, right? And then you know, it would make a difference as to how you speak and what content you have. For example, in the Companions of Abu Abdullah, for example, the content, do they mention their tribes, for example, or the fact that they associate themselves to Abu Abdullah? These things had important messages, right? And this comes down in history as well. When you're later analyzing history, you understand the understanding, the beliefs, the thinking system What were these people
The
thinking? What did
motives
they
behind
have?
the thing.
What goals did they have? All these are important for history. When later we're going to study these events, this is what's going to be important for us, because we won't have individuals, we won't be able to go and interview them or even go to these sites and find out what really happened. This is what's going to remain, right? These the videos that are coming out, the way the leaders are speaking on either side, for example, which teams side with which parties, for example, these are important. So for sure, this is there, and we can't deny that. But again, now when we come to what Sayyid Hassan is doing, like Sheikh mentioned, that we need to understand again the psychology of Sayyid Hassan, or how does Sayyid Hassan speak? What are the keys that you need to keep in mind before analyzing Sayyid's speech? Now, again, from what analysts have to say, or even if you've met people from Lebanon who've lived in Lebanon, even Christians, for example, not just Shia Muslims. If you've seen Sunni Muslims, if you've seen Christians, they'll tell you that one thing we've known about Sayyid is, one, Sayyid is not only concerned about Shias of Lebanon, okay? He is really looking after the entire region, okay? And you'll get comments like, the one thing that stands out about Sayyid Hassan is that he does not bluff. He does not lie, right? So this needs to be kept in mind when you're analyzing his speeches. No, when Sayyid Hassan says something, then you need to keep this key factor in mind, that Sayyid Hassan does not bluff, right? Okay. So
I
now
guess that's why he's loved and respected at the
exactly. You could see the crowd out there for a speech which is a televised speech. It's not even coming on ground, right? And then you see the people in the hall, and then you see the people on the roads, yeah. So now, with keeping this in mind, now Sayyid Hassan comes and Sayyid Hassan when Sayyid Hassan is speaking, he says that people are waiting for Sayyid Hassan to say that we're going to enter the war. So he understands this thing as well, that people are waiting for me to say we're going to enter war. And then Sayyid Hassan's like, excuse me, we've already entered the war. We're already in the conflict, right? So he says that the second day, right after the storm started, we've already entered the next day, right? So he's already entered, and then he mentions some, like the way Sheikh said, he's mentioning hints of what they've done. So he said that we've kept the Israeli forces busy on this side, so on the north. So if you look at the map, you know that Gaza is on the southwest, yeah. Then you have the West Bank, which is on the east of Palestine, and then you have Lebanon on the north. So Lebanon is keeping the Israeli forces busy on ground. And now, interestingly, Sayyid Hassan even mentioned it was important for him to mention that 1/3 of Israel's army is being kept busy on the northern border, right? Whereas Israel would have wanted all their forces to be busy in either looking after Jewish territories or Zionist territories, or in the conflict with Gaza, right? So, and now Sayyid Hassan, in the midst of this, when he comes and says, okay, you're expecting me to announce all-out war, I'm not going to do that. But we've already entered the war. All options are open on the table, and we've already engaged and busied your forces, 1/3 of your forces, on the northern border. Okay, what does this give you? This gives you that, okay, we can enter whenever we want because all options are on the table. So I can decide whenever I want, and then we can announce that we're starting war openly. And if I do that, then obviously you'll need more forces, right? So now, if Sayyid Hassan had, for example, declared open war, for example, obviously then Israel would know, okay, now this is how we need to shift our balance and stuff like that, right? But now when Sayyid Hassan says only 1/3, and he says that all options on the table, that means Sayyid Hassan is saying that, look, I'm not going to announce war today, but I can do that whenever I feel like, right? Whenever it's necessary. So and I'm not going to now give you a warning now. You see, I've made it clear to you that these options are on the table, and I am deciding because of our own interests. We don't feel the need right now to enter the war because it shows that we had Gaza, okay, or the leaders of the operation of the resistance. They had certain ideas, they had certain strategies, they had certain plans and motives, right, for this move, and we're succeeding. So I don't need to now start an all-out open war at this front.
So the ambiguity that he had came with a lot of strength as well. So he was showing that strength that he had.
Definitely.
One thing I noticed when he started, again, the speech started with a lot of emotion. I think everybody was like looking forward to it. When he started, he was speaking about the shuhada, and he went on about talking about the shaheed and shuhada. Like, can you explain the significance of this? Why would he start a speech like this, like focusing on this aspect?
I think you can say that, and that part was very like important part of his speech. And even later, he referred to the shuhada and especially the people of Gaza, and how they are resisting, they're being patient, they're giving martyrs. I feel there are several reasons that he brought this up. One reason is that as a leader of an Islamic resistance movement, he wanted to make it clear that we look at events from an Islamic perspective, from Islamic ideology. And exactly the words in his speech, he said, Hada akidatuna, this is what our belief is, that truly and really we consider these shuhada to be successful. And they have fulfilled their purpose. Okay? And in the last thing I'd mentioned this was, and this is very important, that ihdal husnain. I mean, either you're waiting for victory or martyrdom. And so basically it's the true belief that we have as believers, as those people who believe in the Quran, that in this path of resisting oppression, whatever end comes to us, be it manifest victory or martyrdom, it's something that we cherish and it's important for us. Okay, so that puts things in a spiritual perspective, and that's needed, because many times, especially when you look at these analysts which are like secular, they give you a geopolitical perspective, what's happening on the ground, maybe regional level, maybe even at the global politics level. But at times that spiritual perspective is missing, and we have that spiritual perspective happening. So that's one thing. The second thing I feel was, and again it's important, he started his speech with that, is that when you are fighting oppression, then these things are part of the thing. There's nothing to be scared. There's nothing to feel that, oh, we need to backtrack now. There's nothing to lose that courage that's out there. So it's also for boosting the confidence, of course, based on a reality again. It's not like just saying something to boost the confidence just for the sake of it. No, it's based on a firm Quranic reality. And based on that, now he's giving them confidence that these shuhada have succeeded. And it's now our time to do our duty. Okay? So I think these two would be...
It also shows strength, right? On one side you have the enemy that's scared of death, and then we're not scared of death, right? We're welcoming it with open arms if it comes towards us.
Yeah, so I was just going to add this point that in fact you could say that shahada, martyrdom, is one of the sha'air of Islam. Right? It's one of those things which is held very sacred, where it's very holy in Islam. This is why shuhada have different ahkam, right? This is why doing ziyarah of the shuhada has importance in Islam. So this is one of the symbols of Islam. This is something that stands out in Islam. We give a lot of respect to it. We give a lot of importance to it. And it's one of those things that brings has faith surround it. It invites the Muslims around it. It invites the believers around. So just like you have, for example, you have the masjid, you have Makkah, you have Medina, important sites in Islam. A shaheed is like that. It brings people close to them and around them.
So this thing about the shahada, we believe in the shahada. The other thing is that so there's this question that what does it mean to win this war? And often we see that the one that does the most killing and that has the more military superiority is usually the one seen as the winner. But when we bring shahada in perspective and see that no, actually we're dying for us is not a sign of defeat or failure. It's actually a byproduct of fighting the zalim. And if fighting the zalim will result in some of us dying, then we're welcoming that. We're happy to take that. So this concept of shahada in this whole perspective really gives meaning to the whole war. And a lot of time when we think, we're giving so many deaths, we feel bad about it. But we forget that the end goal is that fighting the oppressor. The end goal is that, and this is going to happen, right? You can't get, and like you mentioned in the last discussion we had, that casualties is part and parcel of the whole thing. Otherwise, Allah would not have sent Prophet Musa. Prophet Musa would not have tried to save the Bani Israel. Abu Abdullah would not have gone to Karbala, because all of these have deaths. So we don't run away from death. We welcome death if the goal is the right goal, and that's basically.
Just to add to that, again, these we need to clearly segregate. Like from our side, we are not feared of death. If our duty entails that you have to go and fight, resist, and even if that means shahadat, martyrdom, we are completely ready for that. But that doesn't reduce the gravity of the crimes and the sins and the oppression of the other side. So these are two completely. At times people might think that we are saying that we are ready to die. It makes it like less of a crime for other side to kill. No, that's completely two different things. Okay, you look at from a moment's perspective, that spiritual perspective, he's always winning as long as he's on the path of Iman. Yeah. So even I would add this, that because this human dimension of this conflict is something that's very, I mean, it's never happened in recent modern history that on camera a genocide like this has been happening. It's not happened. I mean, you just go and look at the numbers. Like just today the UN announced that in a single conflict they have lost the highest number of their employees in its history. Okay, more than 88 UN employees have been killed, more than 130 medical staff have been killed, more than 4,000 children have been killed. The destruction that's out there, so that human side of conflict is very grave. So we need to look at the spiritual side, that these people, whoever these people, they died. Even the children, you see these videos that are there, very strange, that they died while they're doing their duty. Okay? Whatever ma'rifat and understanding they had. So they are successful. I mean, they have nothing to lose. So I think the spiritual dimension of the thing is important to even put in perspective the human dimension of the conflict, which again is very, very heavy. I mean, we see all these videos and clips coming out. And that doesn't reduce from the cruelty of the oppressors and what the other side is doing, whoever they are and wherever they are.
There's one thing that Sayyid Hassan mentioned regarding the 7th October. If I'm not mistaken, he mentioned this as a turning point. Is that correct? That the 7th of October was a turning point in the conflict. On the other side, we tend to criticize the other side for making the 7th of October as a starting point for the war. And so they always keep asking, would you condemn the resistance for making this move, for attacking Israel, sort of like unprovoked, right? But we are also saying that the 7th of October was a starting point for something new. So can you explain this? Are we not playing, double standard basically?
Again, when it comes to analyzing issues, it's like you're watching a 100-episode serial, and then you come at episode number 51, for example, and then you're like, oh, why did, for example, Gaza hit back at Israel? But you're watching the movie or the serial from like halfway through, right? Like there's an entire history. So again, now keeping in mind when you're analyzing this issue, again, you need to go back in time. You need to look at exactly what the conflict is about. Where did the whole thing start? Is it something that started on the 7th of October? Or no, this is something that's going on at least since the 1800s and then into the 1900s. The different treaties that were made. UK's role in taking up governing Palestine and promising that they would set up a government and leave it for the Palestinians, and then they would leave the country. Yeah, the Balfour Agreement. Okay, then again, the Jewish or the Zionist settlers that came in, what were their motives, right? How did they start buying land, or how did they start, for example, cheating and getting land from the Palestinians, right? And then the agreement that was made, the partition that was made between Palestinian lands and Israeli lands, and then what of that remains today. So when you look into history, and then after after all of that, the amount of conflicts that have happened so far, and the amount of Palestinians that have been killed, yeah, starting from the war in 1967, the Arab-Israel conflict. Okay, from there, if not before that at least. Okay, the number of Arabs that were killed. Okay, and then from then until today, the amount of Palestinians that have been killed, the type of bombs and chemical attacks that Israel has done on Palestine. When you take all of this into account, and then you come and say, okay, now today at one point in time, Palestine had the strength, the courage, the readiness to carry out such an attack, and they were able to keep this in secrecy. And again, this was one of the strong elements that Sayyid Hassan kept emphasizing on. It took Israel by surprise, right?
It took everyone by surprise.
It took everyone by surprise.
Said that even he didn't know about it.
Yeah. So their secret agencies, their police, their military, all of that, their radars, everything, a completely covert operation. Okay, and Palestine is able to get paragliders into those lands. Okay, again, these are not completely Israeli lands. These are lands that were meant to be Palestinian lands, and Israel has made settlements has settlements now on those lands. So these are really Palestinian lands by their right? And now Palestine is able to carry out a covert operation. This is what Sayyid Hassan is referring to. By keeping all this in mind, and now Palestine is able to
So what's the
respond.
turning point of that thing? From our perspective, why would we say this is a new time? This is something new that's happened?
So before that, I think one thing that Sayyid Hassan mentioned, so the history of the conflict is definitely very important, and I would urge my audience that we need to go and look back at the history, even a brief overview of the history, because without that you can't put things in perspective. So Sheikh Bakir mentioned a very few those important places. What Sayyid Hassan mentioned in his speech is that someone might come and say that, oh, that was past. Let's say that was, 1960s, 70s. Recent times, after 2000, everything has been fine. So Sayyid Hassan in his speech points out to those 4 or 5 important problems and oppressions that the Palestinians have undergone in the last 20 years, especially after 2006 when Israelis pulled out of Gaza. Okay. After that, it has been a constant you see that Netanyahu and his government comes into power from 2012-13. For more than 10 years, they are ruling. They are the far-right Israelis. Okay? And what this has meant for the region is that Gaza is the largest open-air prison. And then yesterday I was watching this video. I mean, some of them, for example, Lauren Booth, they said that I go a step further. It's a concentration camp. It's not just an open-air prison. Everything is controlled. Your food is controlled. Your electricity is controlled. Your money is controlled. I mean, Palestine doesn't have a central bank. Israeli central bank collects money, tax money on behalf of the Palestinians, and they decide to give it to the Gazans and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. And right now, when this conflict started, they've cut off the payments. And they keep doing it. Suddenly they'll say that, oh, this happened, we're not paying you your own money, the government money. So the issue of Gaza has been an important issue. Okay. Building of settlements in West Bank, it's constantly happening. Settler attacks on Palestinians. Okay, this is another theme that you can go and search online. It's been constantly happening. They go, they attack, they kill people, they burn their olive farms. Okay, they destroy their houses. So these 3 issues he mentioned.
You mentioned last time that a lot of these so-called civilians are not actually civilians. They're
armed
trained.
settlers.
They're armed settlers, yeah.
They are trained. Everybody in Israel has to undergo military training. Men and women after a certain age, and these people who are settlers who live in these illegal settlements, they're armed. I mean, they're armed and they carry out these attacks. So I think it's even important to note that even these last 20 years have been a lot of oppression on Palestine and on Gaza. And what's sad in this whole story is that these last 20 years were portrayed to the world in the media as if everything is fine. And this is one of the strategies that they wanted to completely wipe out any memory of Palestine and Palestinian conflict from the minds of global public opinion in Muslim countries. And you saw that happening, right? Like Arab countries normalizing their relationship with Israel. What does that mean? I mean, people don't know what's happening on ground. They just see this big news. They say, well, everything is okay now. The Arabs are completely okay with Israel. So one of the things that this 7th October incident did was it completely shattered all these clouds and clouds of deception that were being made by the media. And now the reality, as it was, is coming out. So I think that's important that these last 20 years also have been something which he mentioned in his speech. So that put things in context that even the 7th October is a build-up of what's happening in these last 20 years.
Well, it's a turn of events now in the sense that now at least, so now again, in history at least, we'll have this, that after all these 20 years, 40 years, 60 years of all the oppression, the control that Israel has on Palestinian territories, and then despite all of this, the strength, they're known to be one of the strongest militaries, and again, Sayyid Hassan mentioned to this as well, that you claim to have the strongest military force, at least in the region, if not the whole world. Yeah. Despite all of that, and then on 7th of October, such an event takes place, which goes on for so many days, and then the conflict is still going on, and the failures of Israel in the process, and so on.
So what does he mean by, because I'm guessing this has to do with when he says that Israel's military, or Israel is weaker than the spider's web. So what is he referring to exactly in this?
So, I mean, let me quote this what he said. So he said that, I'll just quote one part of what he said. So he said that regardless of the actions taken by the Israeli government in the past month, means after the operation, and the weeks to come, it remains incapable of altering the enduring strategic consequences of this operation. Okay. So basically saying that whatever they do, Israel before 7th October and Israel after 7th October are two completely different things. Okay. Now, to understand that, I think we need to put into perspective this operation itself, okay, and what it meant for Palestinians to having carried out this operation. Again, there's many dimensions to it, and I think Sheikh Bakir was very right that when you look at an event, we need to look at it from multiple angles, from multiple views. I mean, that's how like a successful photographer is, right? You want to capture the reality of something, you look at it from different angles. You take a drone shot, you take like a satellite image. There's so much out there happening. But just the immediate impact is that it's a defeat for Israel and its backers, which is the entire Western world, at military and intelligence and in that on-ground level. Because, I mean, just to give an example, and I think this is something which is openly available, I mean, the whole entire Gaza strip is covered by a fence. That fence is around 10 meters high, something that no one can climb. And it is said that under the fence, in the ground, maybe up to 30, 40 meters, they have concrete installed there so that tunnels can't be dug. And when those concrete blocks end, there are sensors that sense that if any tunnel is being dug, even under that, there are sensors that detect that. Okay, these fences have the most advanced technology, not the most advanced Israeli technology. They have the most advanced global technology because these countries share their technology with Israel. Some of them Israel produces, they export it to the world. Cameras, sensors, radars, and all of these are connected to systems with AI. Okay. I mean, it's something that it's already been deployed in these military places, whereby when things are moving, AI detects, is it a bird? Is it something else? Is it a missile? Okay. And now, in a matter of 30 minutes, okay, a few hundred resistance fighters breach this fence from more than 20 places and go inside. Even right now, it's not very well known how did they manage to do it. Okay, did they disable their systems before they entered? There are some other ways to tackle this. How was the communication between them? So at a military and intelligence level, it's a defeat of their entire technology. Okay, and because one important thing to note is that the way Israel survived and carried out its occupation was this balance of power, whereby Israel has the best complete thing in everything. They have money, they have technology, they have military, they have bombs, they have everything. And the other side has nothing. And it can do things at will, and the other side is not going to be able to do anything. That's the balance of power with which it functioned for the last 70 years. And we've seen this, that UN partition plan gave 52% to Israel, 48% to Palestinians. Come 2023, before 7th October, Palestinians had 8% remaining and 92% was Israelis. Even the West Bank is like households, they've built settlements. So how did they manage to do this? This balance of power, where the one side has everything, diplomatic support, international, the other side has nothing. 7th October has completely changed this.
Challenge that basically.
That balance of power has changed now. Means that they cannot be challenged, they cannot be attacked at an extensive level. So if you just see the numbers, for example, number of Israeli hostages taken from 1948 until 2023 might be less than 20. In these 75 years, number of hostages that all Palestinian movements could take is less than 20. In this one single operation, they have more than 200 hostages. So they call it's a game changer. It's a turning point in terms of balance of power. Okay, and from here, I mean, this is just one aspect. There's many impact it's going to have on the on-ground reality.
Now, Sayyid Hassan ruled out Iran's involvement in all this, and one of the things he made very clear is that Iran has nothing to do with this. He even said that we have nothing to do with this. We didn't even have a clue this was happening. When we found out the next day, we got involved. What's the significance of this? Why is this important? And why does he need to spell this out? And really, really, Iran had nothing to do with this. Could they have done all this on their own?
So again, when we're analyzing these issues, what happens is, because we're on this end of the table, right? We're not the ones who are making these decisions. History, sociology, politics is a bit like biology, chemistry, in the sense that you need to have hypotheses, you carry out certain experiments, and then you try and see that is your conclusion in line with your hypothesis or not, right? So now what happens in these standard everyday analysis is that you have the narrative that the West has portrayed, right? That you have Iran versus America, and everyone else in the world are proxies for these two, and then everything that's happening in the world is mostly a proxy war, right? Now, and unfortunately, then what happens is, now if those who are siding with America, for example, or those who have a soft heart for Israel, for example, if they were to have this kind of understanding, we can't say anything to them. Okay, this is what they've seen. This is the narrative that they're feeding on. But then, unfortunately, sometimes even in the believers, the mu'mineen, they sort of, see this at a very surface level, a very simplistic political struggle between Iran and America for control over, for example, the Middle East. Yeah. Now, in the midst of this is a hypothesis that different players are trying to suggest and put forward. And then in the midst of this, Sayyid Hassan comes forward, and Ayatollah Khamenei also mentioned this in his previous speech, in the last speech that he had last week. They come forward as the leaders of the resistance, and they come forth and they say that, look, this is not a proxy war, right? This is, as Imam Khomeini had mentioned, Israel is a cancerous existence in the Middle East, and it is going to affect the entire Middle East. And at the moment, it is oppressing and it is unjust towards the Palestinians. And it is the right of the Palestinians to stand and fight this cancer. And the Muslims as brothers, and especially even if you're not a Muslim, if you're in this region and you understand how Israel is working, then you need to be afraid of how it's going to affect your region as well. So as any sane human in the region, at least, you need to understand that what your responsibility with regards to this cancerous existence is, right? So in this now, Sayyid Hassan, Ayatollah Khamenei, they come forth and say that, look, Palestine has leaders of their own. They have their unit of the resistance, okay? And they've come to an understanding that, look, we are ready for such a challenge. Because it doesn't make sense also for, just like the resistance would claim that America has, for example, no right to make decisions about what happens in Yemen, for example, or what happens in Syria, for example, right? The people of that land need to make decisions for themselves. Similarly, Palestinians themselves need to make decisions for themselves. Do they want to give in to Israeli occupation of their lands, or do they want to resist? Right? This is a completely Palestinian cause in that sense, and Palestine needs to decide. So now Palestine has decided, their leaders have come to a decision that they want to carry out this operation. If you see, if this was an external decision, you could have had Palestinians, for example, complaining that we don't want this storm. We don't want to fight Israel. We're happy living in this occupation, for example. At least it's allowing us to live. Yeah, we're living. We're not dying in hundreds and thousands every day.
Okay, so I've seen people say, for example, that this showed that it's worrying that Sayyid Hassan is admitting that Palestinians managed to do this on their own. They didn't need any help, which shows they've got a lot of strength. But two things: one is, genuinely, didn't anybody help them? And secondly, doesn't that show disunity within the resistance movement? That, they have one cause, but they're not in synchrony with each other. Maybe this had a negative impact on other things.
So I think when we say that it's their decision, they have to make the choice, and they have done this. And that's what Sayyid Hassan was saying, that it was a Palestinian choice. And as the Quran says that, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Each nation, each group has to decide for themselves about their future. And that's what the Palestinians have done. They have chosen the path of resistance and they are going ahead. That doesn't mean others are not supporting. And as Sheikh mentioned, that as Muslim brothers, everybody must support. And whoever has this realization of Muslim brotherhood, okay, they're supporting. So it's not the case that they are not supported. But support is one thing, making decisions for others or carrying out others' tasks, okay? And we, even in our individual interactions, are like this, right? Like, if you see an individual who doesn't have will of his own, doesn't have identity of his own, is always in that state of like humiliation, others have to do his work, That's not a very good position to be in. A true individual moment is such that he himself makes for his. He has his own identity, he has his own personality, he has his self-respect. He'll fight for his rights. But many times he will feel that in order to fight for my rights, I need my friend's help. He's going to call for help. So at a social scale, this is what exactly is happening. Iran is supporting. And that's why just yesterday, the Hamas chief, Ismail Haniyeh, came and met Ayatollah Khamenei yesterday. And he said the same thing, that it's our constant policy, and it's one of the unchanging policies of Islamic Republic, is to support Palestinian resistance. Okay, and he said it clearly before that we're going to support them in all possible ways, something acknowledged by the resistance. But that's a different thing that's out there, that we support them, but they have to uprise for their rights. And I think this is also one of the achievements of the 7th October event, that, I don't want to sound exaggerating, but I think this is what's happening, that a new Palestinian identity, a very strong, a very brave one, has now already taken shape. It's out there. Okay, Palestinian nation have realized that, this is the path to take. Either we reach victory or martyrdom. And the videos show this. Even the children there, this is video someone shared. It's the children of Palestine. They're having a light candle vigil in the Shifa hospital. And it's one of those places where all these civilians and children are there. So you see this video and it's amazing. This
شهداء الله يا ربي ارحمهم يا رب حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل فيكم انتم ما بتخافوا اصلا.
Imagine, this is very interesting. It's very emotional also, but it's very interesting even to see that. They're saying, this is a small girl is saying, we're not scared of you. Okay, we trust in Allah. We're scared of Allah. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel.
So I don't know if you mentioned in the last discussion, or was it another analysis that I was going through, where we were discussing how when this whole Palestinian movement was Arab-centric, it wasn't going forward very well. But when the identity shifted to more Islamic identity, and we see this again, the Allah is always in the picture, the Islamic identity is in the picture, and that Islamic identity and this whole idea of shahadat and sacrificing yourself for a greater cause, all this is giving more strength to the Palestinian movement. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, just adding on to Sheikh's points. So if it would be a bit humorous, or it would be funny to say that, for example, if the Palestinians, for example, were individuals who were they didn't want to fight for their rights, they didn't want to stand up, they didn't want to fight the oppression, and then you have external groups, external factions coming in saying, oh, we want to help these people. And at that point, in fact, it would be right to come and say, but wait, these guys are fine. Why do you want to come and intervene when they're happy living the way they are, right?
I guess usually biggest powers use proxies when it's to their benefit. But when we look at Iran, Iran getting involved in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is at their detriment.
So exactly, this was the point that I was trying to make. The difference between America or any people, any group with this kind of ideology versus the resistance is that when you have a group or party that wants to get control over different lands or different regions, then that's where you create proxies, for example, because you want to get some sphere of influence, or you have a sphere of influence, you want to get greater power, you want to benefit from those lands, you want to make gains from the people over there. Okay, so this is one motive. And then you have the resistance. The motive of the resistance is not to get control of a certain land. Iran, for example, has its own issues to deal with. It does not want to gain control or, form a government, for example, in Palestine. What it wants to do is help people become independent.
But that's the impression we're given, right? We're told that Iran is trying to influence Iraq, it's trying to influence Syria, and slowly get control over the whole region.
and that's why, first of all, it's important for the likes of Sayyid Hassan and Ayatollah Khamenei to keep emphasizing that, look, This is themselves. This is what the resistance does. It gives independence.
So this is important. I think we've reached a really important point over here. We need to differentiate when Iran says that, look, we're not involved in this war. They're not taking away their responsibility or showing distance. They're trying to give identity and show that we want independence for that. We're not trying to control it.
And at the same time reiterating that our support will be there.
Yeah.
If you're fighting a right cause, we'll be there to support you with whatever means we have. Is it diplomatic means? Fine. Is it some other means? Is it like raising awareness, coming and speaking? In all possible ways, we're going to support you. But those people have to stand up for their cause. And what's very interesting, and it's very at times surprising, and at times you can't believe, is that how well these people of Gaza and these resistance fighters, they have woken up to this cause. And believe me, I mean, I say this personally, it's easy to say that, okay, we'll fight, we'll resist, but being there in Gaza, I mean, under constant bombardment, you know your loved ones are going to die in front of your own eyes, to pull bodies from the rubble, okay? The resistance fighters have to stay awake probably the whole time, fighting this battle. It's easily said than done. So I think, I mean, I said this last time, I'll say this time and next time, we salute these people. These resistance fighters, the people there, the children there, look at this, children, the amount of, at times you see the understanding they have of what's happening around them. Inshallah, at this level, it's a victory, that it's led to awakening of a whole nation, whereby based on Islamic values, they're standing up for their rights. Whatever be the result, even if it means shahada, they're successful. So in that sense, it's victory.
This is why I think also, I personally believe one of the reasons Sayyid Hassan started with talking about shuhada is to appreciate the sacrifice and to empathize that, look, we are aware that you guys are giving lives. We appreciate that. We thank you for it. We empathize with you. Show that support as well, that we are aware this is happening.
That's how it started. The whole tone was like that. It started with a tone where he's feeling their pain. He started speaking in a way that he can feel their pain, that loved one being lost, his own son being one of the martyrs that we know.
I'm going to drop a controversial bomb right now, which the reason for that is because I think that question is there in people's minds, but I think it's not discussed enough, and I think we can try and give some light to this. So recently I was going through one of Ayatollah Khamenei's speeches, and he was saying that this is not a war between Gaza and Israel. This is a war between truth and falsehood. It's a war between Iman and Kufr. That's a heavy statement, right? On the okay, we understand the Kufr side, we understand it. But on the Palestinian side, number one, many Shias do say that, look, the Palestinians are not Shia, right? And they claim that many of these Palestinians, in fact, hate the Shias. This on one side. On the other side, also adding to this, we see that a lot of people supporting the Palestinian cause are not even Muslims. So we have the Jews that are supporting. They're saying we're those who dissociate themselves from Israel. You have Christians who are being bombed in Gaza. And then you have Christians in Lebanon who are supporting the Lebanese movement. Like you mentioned earlier, Sayyid Nasrallah is respected by everybody in Lebanon, not just the Shias. And then when we look throughout the world, all the protests are happening, we see a lot of non-Muslims part of this. So what does it mean when we're saying it's a battle between Iman and Kufr? I mean, those are very heavy statements.
First of all, again, this is a good question. This is a very interesting question. It's something that unfortunately is often not discussed. And yes, we've come across, in fact, we've unfortunately even come across scholars where the Palestinians are unfortunately referred to as Nasibis, for example, for their beliefs, for maybe at some point in time. You have scholars, for example, who will insist on not raising their voice for the Palestinian conflict. You'll come across scholars who will insist that the least that you should do in this, or the most that you should do in such a conflict is when you look at oppressors and the oppressed, you just remember Imam Zaman and you call out to him, but that's it. You do not mention the Palestinian conflict, you do not refer to them, you do not raise your support for them, you do not analyze the issue on ground. So yes, we have this understanding amongst our scholars as well, unfortunately. But then on the other hand, what does it mean to say a conflict is, for example, an Islamic conflict or an Islamic issue? Yeah, there could be different components in an issue, that would allow you to decide whether an issue is an Islamic issue or not, or is something that affects the Muslims or not. For the very least, the fact that our Muslim brothers are affected and they're in the midst of this crisis makes this our issue, right? The Muslims are like one body, they're like one building, okay? One organ being affected puts the whole body in pain, right? So this in itself is sufficient to say that this affects all of Islam. So this is at least a Muslim issue, and all Muslims are involved in this, right? Then when you step it up further, you start looking at the motives, the motives, the aims that the resistance or the Palestinians at least have. This is what then starts. So if we had a scale, for example, of 1 to 10, and we would want to say that, okay, at what level or what scale can you call this an Islamic issue, okay, or something that affects the Muslims and Islam, you'd start looking at different components, right? So you say, okay, are Muslims affected? Yes, they are. Is the Muslim region affected? Yes, it is. Okay, now we start looking at where are the aims. So again, if we go back to before the revolution, before 1979, so 1967, and the whole pan-Arab movement, and then the Israel-Arab conflict and the war that happened, the 6-day war that the Arabs really lost, right? But again, when you look at that point, yes, again, the Muslims were involved, the Muslims were being affected, but it was a more
Arab-centric.
Yeah, it was Arab-centric. The aims were not necessarily Islamic, right? Okay. Again, maybe the Zionists at that point were fighting these individuals because of, the Arab movement. So the Arabs were trying to have, or at least these same people had an Arab motive, and the Zionists were fighting Arabs at that point. They would not necessarily see them as Muslims because of being Muslims fighting us, right? When you come today, again, these people are referring to themselves as the resistance movement, right? Their goal is to, for example, liberate Al-Aqsa, right? It's for creating peace in the territory. Their aim, when you look at, is to fight oppression, not to fight, for example, a certain group of people or a certain ethnicity. No, they're saying that we want to fight oppressors. Again, this we've learned from Amir al-Mu'mineen at least, right? Kuna lil-zalimi khasman wa lil-mazlumi awnan. At his deathbed, Amir al-Mu'mineen wills to his sons that be a helper to the oppressed and an enemy for the oppressors. Again, so this goes back even to scholars who will say that we have nothing to do with the Palestinians.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
Let's not even talk about those guys, because it doesn't make much sense.
Yeah. So now with that, so now they're fighting. Their aim is to fight oppressors. Their aim is to liberate Al-Aqsa, which is again an important Muslim Islamic symbol, right? It's one of the Sha'air. It's a sacred mosque for us. It's very important in Muslim heritage and in Islamic beliefs. Right? So when you look at all these different factors, you realize that it's Muslims who are fighting the Zionists, right? Or it's this ideology. That's why, so now when Ayatollah Khamenei says it's Iman versus Kufr, it's a certain ideology, right? It's Islamic resistance. It's not just, okay, we're helping, for example, a certain group of people with a certain ethnicity and they can have whatever belief they have. No, it's an understanding, it's an ideology that we need to live up to these beliefs, right? And then on the other hand, you have Kufr.
I think I don't want to say it like this, but I mean, this kind of a question is, especially in a situation like this we're going through, is like, the least I would say is ridiculous. Because on one side, you have, I mean, just a simple example, if there's an earthquake and there are people suffering, there's an earthquake in Turkey, okay? And there's innocent people who are trapped under the rubble and everything. Are we as mu'mineen and believers going to ask that, is that a Sunni? Is that a Christian? Is that a thing? Okay. I think it's important. I think this question had several aspects. So I think from our side as mu'mineen and as believers, it's absolutely clear that we have to help the oppressed. Mm-hmm. And again, the religion of that person doesn't matter. Yes, their guidance is important as what faith they follow. But right now they're being oppressed, and this saying of Amir al-Mu'mineen, I think, so important. And this is something which is saying on his deathbed. This is the last wasiyat, one of the last wasiyat, that look, oppression is something as a mu'min I can't tolerate. It doesn't matter who's being oppressed.
That reminds us the hadith where Imam Ali said that if a Jewish lady in my territory is oppressed, then if somebody hears this and dies, then I wouldn't be blamed for
them,
that. Yeah.
So
So it was regardless of their faith.
So I think as mu'mineen, our sensitivity to oppression should be very high. So I mean, it's like those seismographs that record earthquakes, right? They're so sensitive. Should be very sensitive to oppression, and this kind of oppression, where people are being bombed, where children are being killed recklessly without anything, whole families like wiped off from the registries. I mean, it's something. So I think that part. Then add to that what Sheikh mentioned. It's a Muslim issue. I mean, our ahadith tell us, "Man sami'a musliman yunadi liyal al-muslimin falam yujibhu falaysa bi-muslim." When a Muslim calls out to you and you don't reply as a Muslim, you yourself are not a Muslim. You're not lived up to the requirements of your deen and your iman. Add to that, it's not even just oppression and thing to do with Muslim population, it's about the whole Muslim ummah. This statement that Imam Khomeini mentioned, that Israel is a cancerous tumor, it's not just a slogan. He's saying that Israel's presence in the region makes the region unstable, weakens the Muslims. The Arab governments cannot do what they're supposed to do for their own people. I'll just mention one simple, I'd really urge our readers to read. So there's very well-known journalist, Jonathan Cook, who has been working on this conflict for many, many years as an award-winning journalist. He wrote this book in 2008 called Israel and the Clash of Civilizations, Iraq, Iran, and the Plan to Remake the Middle East. There's something more going on. At times, I feel that our understanding of these events is, as Sheikh mentioned, very simplistic. We're just looking at, this happened a few events.
There's a conflict and this person hit this person and this person hit him back. And
that's it. Even that's important. Even as we mentioned the example, in the forest, if someone is oppressing someone, I'm going to take a stance as a Muslim. But look at from the outside. And I'll just read this like it says that. Journalist Jonathan Cook explores Israel's key role in persuading the Bush administration to invade Iraq. As part of a plan to remake the Middle East, what's the ultimate aim? So that Israel can be the unquestioned regional power in the Middle East, so that Muslims are always weak, always humiliated. It keeps taking their land. And this is something very, I think it's important for us to realize. I don't know how that. Let us say that this Palestinian conflict ends, by the way Israel wanted. Even let's say like the way Israel wanted it, it completely, and by the way, this is not a conspiracy theory. Again, this same journalist has written a piece, we'll share it in the link. He said that this idea that they want to push the entire Gazan population into Sinai is being discussed for the last 16 years by Israelis. So let's say in that they get their ideal solution. They kick out all the Palestinians from the land and they get the 100% of the land. Is it going to stop there? Is that the end? Is Israel going to not occupy more Islamic land? It already occupies Shab'a farms in Lebanon, Golan Heights in Syria. Presence of Israel, is a problem, is a menace. There's a certain expression was used by Ayatollah Khamenei many years ago. He described Israel as a stray dog in the region who can do things at will. Imagine you're living peacefully with your family and your friends, neighbors, and there's a stray dog there can do anything there. So I think
everything
even in that
you
sense,
lose that peace and that sense of security.
So that's why Ayatollah Khamenei came and said that the first and the most important issue of the Muslim Ummah is the Palestinian issue. Someone might question that, there are other issues. Kashmir is an issue. There's other issues, and we recognize those to be issues. But we need to even have a bit of insight on the geopolitics of the thing, that look, it's not just a humanitarian issue. It is. It's not just Muslim issue, Muslim population being oppressed. It's the destiny of the entire Muslims around this region, and for that matter around the world, that's tied to this. So I think we have a duty as Shias, as the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, and I think Alhamdulillah, this conflict, 7th October, has made it clear that those people who truly support the Palestinian cause, who are they? It's made it very clear. It's either Lebanon, it's either Yemen, it's either Iran, and this is a place where we question, where are all those other people who, Turkey didn't even so far have the thing to cut off relationship. That's the least you could do, right? It doesn't take anything.
And worse, you have Houthis firing rockets at Israel, and Saudi Arabia comes and intercepts these.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that this conflict has done is that those curtains of nifaq and hypocrisy are being lifted. And this is one of the results of resistance.
Yes, can you say that when we say about a battle between Iman and Kufr is basically those who truly believe in Islam and understand the importance of preserving the Ummah, their role in this conflict is very clear. And so whoever gets involved in this sense, those are the people of Iman.
Yeah, definitely. I'll just add one more thing to the Haqq and Batil comment, the question that was there, and he said it very prominently in his last speech that this is not a battle between Gaza and Palestinians and Israelis. I think there's two other things very quickly I'll mention. One is that he added some other equivalent. So he said it's a battle between truth and falsehood. It's a battle between the arrogant powers and Iman. So that's another thing. So he was trying to say that this conflict, although it's localized, it's actually a global conflict happening there. And even Sayyid Hassan mentioned this, that actually Israel is, in a sense, carrying out what the Americans want them to carry out. So what they want is now in line with each other. And that's why you see that Blinken going around buying time for Israel to commit its crimes there in Gaza. So they are very in line. So saying that it's a conflict where on one side you have these hegemonic powers who hypocritically would portray themselves as democracies, very nice people, nice ties and everything. But their hypocrisy now is being uncovered. So one of the meanings of this, that this is a battle of Haqq and Batil, is that it's not about individuals. It's about in the overall scale, the Haqq is becoming clear, even for non-Muslims. And they have a role to play. Okay? Yes, we say that these non-Muslims are not on the right path, not on the right deal. But in specific instances and happenings, they can take the side of Haqq. And I feel that this is that movement of a level of global awakening. And this, what it means, that the Haqq is becoming clear. That how terrible these powers who are shamelessly supporting supporting Israel are.
It's
and
so bad that
they're nowhere to hide.
Yeah, it's so bad that politicians and people, non-Muslim people in the different countries have realized, and they're speaking out against their own government.
And it's like people are speaking who you would never imagine they would come and speak, because this resistance has made Haqq and Batil so clear that now people are realizing
the inner conscience of people is now really shouting out like, look, here you have to take a stance, and that's making people that you wouldn't expect really speak out. When it comes to the, you mentioned that the Israeli plan is to remove Gaza, the Palestinians from Gaza. So what? Like, what's the problem? Okay, you want to be in your homeland, you want to be, okay, but why live in a place where you're living in so much turbulence? Just move away, rebuild yourself in a different place, and live your life there. At the end of the day, it's all about living a peaceful life.
So there's several dimensions to this. At one time, you're looking at a personal, individual dimension. Even at that point, if someone is being removed from his land, his property, what he rightfully owns, he has the right to fight back. When would you be ready to leave? When you know that there's no other option and you can't stay. While the resistance fighters have shown that you can defeat Israel. It's not undefeatable. And my main question would be that why don't reverse the argument? What's that thing that allows the Israelis to make the argument that move Gazans into Sinai? Okay, and that also has certain problems. It's not as simple as it's portrayed. I'll mention a few things about it. Let's reverse the argument and say that the Israelis, they came from outside, they occupied the land, they committed oppression, they took away rights, that by any international human law, this is illegal, not allowed. Why don't they go to another place? There's a plenty of land, other places. Let's end the conflict in this way.
I'm not creating an argument.
So what creates this argument is the sheer power that Israel has. Okay. Yeah. So the only thing that allows them to even bring it on their lips, these kind of ideas, is that because they know that probably they can do, and with American support, get away with it. Okay. And that's very barbaric in my opinion, that when someone is so barbaric, has so much power and knows that the other person is so weak, now you go to that weak person, you say that, why are you fighting for your rights? We'll give you another place then. That's one. The second thing is that it's not always a matter of land and a piece of place where you're staying. There's something more important, and that is that those human values are being trampled here. Okay? Their respect is being trampled. Their sense of honor is being trampled. Their being a Mu'min and Muslim is being trampled here. And Islam here tells us that, I mean, this is what we learn from Abu Abdullah. I think at times we learn things from Karbala when we want to practice them. When the time comes, we're not able to apply them. We say this all our lives, hayhat minna dhilla. What does it mean? This is where it applies, that because forcefully being moved from your homeland by a barbaric power who's killed your family, your women and children, is accepting humiliation.
So again, it's about, do you look at the situation from a purely worldly perspective where it's just about a land, or you're seeing greater values involved in this? Right?
Definitely. I would say even, so I'll add my third point, even from a worldly perspective, if someone knows nature of Israel, one. Secondly, why was it created in the first place by the Western powers? That it's so important for them as something to control power in Middle East. So much so that Biden a few weeks ago came and said that if there wouldn't be an Israel, we would create one.
We're also going to discuss the ironclad commitment, and this is, I'll say this 5,000 times in my career, the ironclad commitment the United States has to Israel based on our principles, our ideas, our values. They're the same values. And I've often said, Mr. President, if there were not an Israel, we'd have to invent one.
It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
Okay. They need such a brutal entity called Israel. Okay. So even from a worldly perspective, it's very simplistic to think that Gazans would be moved into Sinai and then all the Arabs and Israel and everyone will live happily forever. That's not what's going to happen. That's not the reason why Israel exists. So even from a very simple geopolitical perspective, and let me give you evidence for that. Okay? If it was so easy and it was so easily done, why is Egyptian president constantly denying that I'm not going to allow to do this? I'm not opening Sinai. It's easy for him, right? And this article which I mentioned of Jonathan Cook mentions that he's being offers to accept this. For example, Egypt right now is in a debt of $160 billion. That's its international debt. Okay. And now one of the things is being offered is that we'll write off your debt, open Sinai. But he's not ready to do that. Because he understands the geopolitical consequences of this. Israel winning here, it's a genocide. It's like ethnic cleansing. But winning here means that next is our turn. So even whoever understands even a bit of geopolitics, what Israel is, it should be very clear that it's Gazans right now. Next is your turn. This region and this is what before the 7th, one of the successes of the 7th October attack I'll mention here is that before 7th October, Israelis in their policy documents and the statements were saying that the technology that we have, the military that we have, the economic power that we have, diplomatic relationship that we are building, we are secure for next 100 years. That's what they're thinking. 7th October came and has shattered that perception that we are secure here. No, you're not secure here. We have good diplomatic outreach. No, we have no diplomatic outreach. And we should also take this opportunity to mention those South American countries who cut off ties with Israel. So Bolivia, it cut off ties. Chile and Cambodia, they have more sense of honor than some of these other countries. So diplomatically they have lost, and right now they are thinking that would we survive the next maybe 5-10 years. So that's how much this 7th October. So if I summarize, I would say that firstly, at an individual level, I have the right to fight back for my land. Secondly, those values are very important. If I would die in honor than to live a life of disgrace, and that's what the Gazans have realized, and they're saying we are staying here, either dying or victory. And this is firmly based on Islamic principles, that you have to stand up for your honor. And thirdly, that is very simplistic to think that if Gazans move out, then everything will be solved. I'll add a fourth thing, and that I forgot to mention, is that how simplistic, how barbaric it is to say that we'll move 2 million people from their homeland destroying their society, destroying their livelihoods, affecting their generations, their children, their women, psychological issues to another land. How can we even say this, that 2.5 million people are being moved? It's human beings, it's human society. It's very simple. It's not like you're moving toys from one place to another place. So I think this idea, and this in today's international law is called ethnic cleansing. Okay, so no one should even think that
this is happening,
this would,
right? So Israel has started to force people to move
that's
from
what it
northern
has
Gaza
done.
to southern Gaza.
1948 is today called as ethnic cleansing. That you, one whole ethnicity or a group of people, you drive them out from their land. Okay, and that causes like undescribable like agony and pain for that population. It's haram. It's like, I mean, I can't think of the punishment that these people who are doing these crimes will have. So I think it's not something to be taken lightly that, oh, it's very simple, let's very peacefully move them. It's not peaceful. You're uprooting the whole society from their homeland. When they go back there, their lives are not the same. Okay, it's very grave to think of these ideas.
So we've digressed a bit from Sayyid Hassan's speech. So let's get back to the speech and some of the points from there. One of the things that Sayyid Hassan did was to address the Americans. What did he say and what was he trying to achieve through that?
Then again, so Sayyid Hassan, we saw that one part of his speech was where he was addressing the Muslims, the Palestinians, or generally the Muslim people who were looking forward to listening to him. He spoke about the martyrs. He spoke about that this being a Palestinian conflict and not being a proxy war for Iran. And so that was one part of the thing. And then he spoke about what the resistance has done so far in Lebanon. He mentioned that they're already engaging Israel on the borders, that Israel has been forced to keep 1/3 of their army at the Lebanese border because of fear. He mentioned that small towns and villages occupied by Israel at the northern border have been vacated because of these battles and the two sides engaging, right? And then he addressed the Americans as well. And some of the points that he made was that he reminded us, or he showed to us, he made clear to us that how Israel is weaker. You mentioned, you made reference to it, is weaker than a spider web. So we already spoke about that. He was using the Quranic verse, or making references to the Quranic verse in Awhan al-Buyuti labayt al-Ankabut. So a spider web is something that looks really beautiful, looks really strong, looks really nice from outside at the surface level, but then when you just poke it, you realize that it's very flimsy. And how the Gazans have shown that really, if they have, because they showed that courage and bravery and strength, they were able to get into and surprise Israel and bypass all these different technological strengths that they have, and they were able to engage with them, and Israel has not been able to sort of give a sufficient response. All they've managed to do is bombard these lands in the worst ways possible. Right? Again, from a political point of view, when a side resorts to bombarding at this large extent, you realize that it's because they don't have other moves left. Really, they don't know what else to do. They've tried to send in their ground forces, but they've not succeeded. Right, so all they can do is just keep bombarding as much as they can. So this, and then he made references to how American fleets have already moved into the region, right? And he sort of mocked the fact that Israel, claiming to have the strongest army in the world or in the region, and yet it's counting on American fleet, shows how weak they are again. And how America also understands the need of being present because of being surrounded by different factions of the resistance army, right? And then Sayyid Hassan made a reference to 1987, if I'm not mistaken, right? He made reference to 1987, and he mentioned that America had been forced in 1987 to leave the region. One of the events that occurred in 1987 was sort of a huge attack in the Israeli region carried out by the Lebanese resistance, where around 250 plus American soldiers were killed in one incident, and around 50 French soldiers as well. So a couple of trucks had entered the Israeli region and they had attacked a military outpost, right? So, and this resulted in the American fleet or the American army being forced to retreat. So again, Sayyid Hassan made it it was important for him to make reference to this and remind the Americans that just like that back then in 1987, when the resistance was still in its initial levels, they were just still in they were not the strongest at that point yet. They had not had the 2006 war. They had not had the Syria conflict had not happened. So even back then, they had forced America to leave the region, at least to that extent. So he's just reminding that, okay, now, be careful, it's 2023 now. The resistance is now today coming forth and saying that we have all options on the table.
Like
right?
you said, he doesn't bluff. So
Yeah.
be careful.
So basically, he's trying to get across the point that, look, we've taken into consideration all these different possibilities. We've already expected that you're going to enter the region. We've already understood that, okay, Israel is going to keep its armies on the Lebanese border. We've taken all of these into consideration. I'm still not calling out for all-out open war, okay? And I'm just reminding you that, look, we have an eye out on you. And you should be ready for this as well. Don't assume that, we've not expected your presence.
Okay, so with Sayyid Hassan's speech, basically explaining the situation that we're going through right now, in general, what has the resistance achieved in this whole thing? Can you list some of it very quickly? What have we got out of this whole movement and everything that's been happening so far?
So I think we just, discussion at points we discussed some of the achievements. So what I'll do is I'll try and very quickly summarize. And I think it's very good that Sheikh Baqi started with that analogy of the forest and zooming out. And that's how the impacts are. And we live in a globalized world. So what's happening there, especially because the so-called big powers are also involved and the whole region is involved. So it's something that's bound to have a lot of impact. So again, these impacts need to be seen in different categories where these impacts are there. So let me start with the where exactly it's happening. So Palestine and Israel, okay? So the occupied land. So one result of this is that the confidence in the Palestinian resistance movement has boosted like anything before. I mean, they know we can do it, we have done this, and it's something that they know they can repeat it. They can do it.
Sayyid Hassan's insistence that this is not being directly supported by the bigger powers.
So their own realization and confidence that this is the path and this is achieving results. So that's one achievement. The second achievement, I would say, we briefly spoke, is about the identity that's taking shape amongst all the Palestinians. That sense of confidence, bravery, those Islamic principles, trust in Allah, that's something very valuable for the Palestinian society. So that had started from before. With this, it will go to a new level. It's a strategic defeat for Israel and the collective West. Because see, it's many times these defeats are seen in terms of change in balance of power. With this event, balance of power has changed, that the technologies they thought couldn't be defeated in next 100 years. That's what they're saying. We have AI, we have sensors, we're watching everything. And at face level, that's how it appears. I mean, since this thing has happened, 7th October, Americans have been flying their spy drones. They're providing them with intelligence from their satellites. All these Western countries. There's another report I was reading that America and some of these Western countries have already sent their elite commando forces there to assist Israelis. Okay, so they put their everything there. It's a strategic defeat in the sense that something they thought is not defeatable in 100 years was just destroyed by like 300, 400, 500 people who had no technology compared to what they had. So it's a big defeat in that sense. And okay, it's the first time we're witnessing this idea of Israeli refugees. Okay, it's always, these last 75 years, you'd always speak of Palestinian refugees. It has never happened. This is the first time that more than 500,000 people have been evacuated from these places. Northern Lebanon,
cities
around
near
Gaza. It's It's called the Gaza envelope. So you have the Gaza Strip and it's called the Gaza envelope, the settlements and the cities that are around. And this is going to put pressure on them, both economically and socially. These 500,000 people are going to go in the central place, and there's already fear. Okay, so that's, and we might be seeing signs of the crumbling of the Israeli society from inside, with their own differences, their political differences, their social differences, their ethnic differences. So that's all there. Israeli society is a complex one. And the other thing, inshallah, we pray to Allah that this is what happens, is that inshallah, Israel won't be able to achieve the goals they announced. So this is what Sayyid Hassan mentioned several times, that this is a mistake from which they never learn. That even 2006, when they attacked Hezbollah, when they attacked the resistance in Lebanon, they announced that we're going to finish the resistance and wipe it out. Okay, so he said that in a speech that they never learned, that they announce very big objectives, then they realize we can't meet these objectives, and then they have to change it and somehow cover it up. So that's
Doesn't
another
that actually
defeat.
show that they're not genuine about their objectives? They just want to come and do some destruction and put fear in the enemy, right?
So at times that might be possible. At times they might misjudge their own because of their arrogance, because of their brutality and that barbaric nature that's there.
And
they
underestimate
underestimate
because of
and they want to belittle the
underestimating.
other side. So all of these are achievements, okay? And I don't know, I think we need to become a bit more, I think this was very important, we need to become a bit more sophisticated in understanding that defeat and win is not just measured by, okay, I mean, the numbers, for example, of the people killed. Okay, so that's at the level of the Palestine. At the regional level is going to have a lot of impact. Awakening of the Muslims around the thing, and you see these protests and everything, it's good for them. They
Sorry,
have themselves awakening to this
Just
thing.
before you go on to the international level or the regional level, even just so, Sheikh mentioned the effects in Palestine, but again in Israel, so he mentioned crumbling of the society, but then add to that, at the government level, again, the different parties that form the parliament, the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu is, for example, at certain points, he was blaming the different chiefs and leaders, like the defense minister, the military chiefs, saying that how were the Palestinians able to, come on this side, for example, and breach their security. So this is going to create some tensions. The reverse migration that will possibly increase. So these are some things that we'll probably see in the future as well with regards to Israel.
So definitely in terms of the Palestine-Israel situation, a lot has changed. So before 7th October and after 7th October is going to look very different. Regional level, awakening of Muslims, it's good for them. Pressure on the governments. These Arab governments, they are now pressurized by their own people to act, to do something. Okay, so that's another thing. Normalization of ties with Israel is not
Going to be so easy.
going to be so easy from now on. They have taken big steps in that.
In fact, even normalization with ties with America. Okay, obviously they're not going to sever ties with America, but like for example, if you see Turkey, people are just attacking the American embassy.
Yeah. Or yesterday there was in the news that a convoy of Turkish people with their cars, they went to one of the American bases in southern Turkey to protest. Okay. So awakening of the Muslim masses, and again, it's too early to say that, but probably, if other conditions change, we might even see a second wave of Islamic awakening, okay? Whereby now this becomes the catalyst, the Palestinian cause becomes the catalyst that Muslims wake up to their own rights and the problems in their own country. So it's going to put a lot of pressure on the local governments, and these governments are feeling it. And therefore, to offset that pressure, they're giving statements. They're not doing anything. That's very important to note that, yes, they're giving statements to offset that pressure that's there, but the least they could have done is cut off ties with Israel or stop exporting items. Okay, a lot of these countries still have the trade ties. So that's the second thing. The third thing is that normalization of ties with Israel is going to become very difficult after this. Fourth, axis of resistance in the region, and especially Islamic Republic, will now increase in its power. Again, in that same sense which Sheikh Bakir mentioned, that it's pursuing some goals for the Muslim Ummah, for the people. Those goals are now going to get a boost, because now in the region it's clear who stands where. The positions are becoming very clear, so it's naturally going to give a boost to the benefits that are there for the Muslim Ummah. Take it a step further, at a global level, amongst the people around the world who are following the conflict, hypocrisy of the West is being uncovered. And I think this is something so important that if we had like thousands and thousands of muballighin going and speaking about this thing, that look, these Western powers are not what they portray. They have a very like black record of in everything that they have done, wouldn't have been able to. This sacrifice has made it apparent for this thing, to the extent that I'll show a very interesting clip here very quickly. This is he's the head of the Al Jazeera media group, the previous head of the Al Jazeera media group, and look what he says, that a lot has changed after this conflict.
What kind of leadership, what kind of model the West is giving us now? I think it is the end of that kind of model that has been for decades trying to establish itself as the reference point for a so-called civilized world. You know, what kind of civilization is this that kill children while denying them food, drinks, bombing hospitals, and killing their parents, and of course denying the knowledge or even the acknowledgement of their death? This is very low moment in the history of the Western values, and I think it is in a way or another a moment for the world to move on and to start thinking beyond the Western colonial, imperial, hegemonic nature.
So I would emphasize on this, that this colonial, imperial, hegemonic nature of the Western powers is now becoming uncovered. Because on one side, they're forced to support Israel because they want to protect it. But that's coming at the cost of people realizing, and I think that's a big achievement. Again, resistance brings that fruit, that people become aware. Okay, and that's there. And they are losing the battle of narratives. And this is something so important because Israelis and the Jewish lobby and the Zionist lobby has always had an upper hand in the battle of narratives through media, through so many other things they do.
This is something we're getting somewhere because the media is still under their control.
So we always see this in a relative sense. So the amount of control they had before, where the only Israeli narrative would work, and the Palestinian cause was erased from the memory as if it doesn't exist. Even if it would be mentioned, it would be the Israeli side, and that their narrative, that balance has changed a lot. Again, it's not just like an incremental, a small change. It's a big shift, and we realize this from even in the media. This is being said. On the streets, people are waking up, and I think overall, it's creating an awakening amongst the people who are following. Look at the sizes of the protests that are there. Okay? London had at least 100,000. The one that happened yesterday or day before yesterday in Washington, D.C., they're saying up to 1 million people. You look at Indonesia. There's things in East Europe, different countries in East Europe that we never hear about them. For example, that they are protesting. So even the scale of the protest and the amount of awakening, and again, awakening in support of the oppressed. Okay, so again, I'm not saying that everything has been achieved, but this is something achieved.
There's a lot.
There's a lot, and I'll mention one last thing, and that's this was at the global level in terms of the people. A lot will also change in terms of the global balance of power and global politics. So what's happening is that US hegemony and power is on decline. It was already declining with the rise of China. But with this episode, it's declining even further. You saw the clip. He's not no ordinary man. He's a head of Al Jazeera media group. He's seeing this, that look, your values, your way of life, your civilization cannot be the guiding and reference point when you're killing children. And not even acknowledging it, you're just brushing it under the carpet.
It always comes back to no, but these many died on the 7th of October.
So even acknowledge at least, so I think that's a low point. It's a low point in the Western civilization. So decline of Western civilization is imminent, which is led by the US. Russia is moving away even further from the US. Okay, so just 2 days ago, Putin gave a very strong statement against America, comparing the different things that are happening and saying that all these troubles that we see around the world is a result of US hegemony. So Russia will move away and China will take the opportunity in this whole thing to even weaken America. So that power is also changing. Of course, that changes the least. Unless this conflict turns into a regional or even a bigger conflict, then this global balance of power will even change faster. One last thing I would say is that how do we see all of this in one point or in a nutshell? I think I'll mention what Sayyid Hassan mentioned at the end of his speech, referring to what Ayatollah Khamenei mentioned in his speech, that inshallah the victory is near. That's how we see it, inshallah.
So I will pray for that. There's a lot to discuss. A lot of things are happening, even like you mentioned about the Western power against the East. We see recently some heads of European states having going to Africa. There's a lot happening in the world, and it'd be interesting to discuss all of these. One last thing, was there anything practical that we can get from Sayyid Hassan's speech?
Sayyid Hassan, at the end of his speech, he calls out at least to the Arab nations, because they're like the Muslim nations, right?
You would have most expectations from
he's one of the leaders of Islamic resistance. So he's calling out at least to the so-called Muslim nations and the leaders of the so-called Muslim states. And he calls out to them, and he sort of makes a call to them, and he says that the least that you can do, they're a level where they're intercepting missiles aimed at Israel, but so he says that please, cut off your supplies and your aid to Israel. So there are Muslim countries who are giving food supplies. They're providing gas and oil to Israel. Yeah, and he calls out to them. So now, keeping that in mind, this in itself is one of the practical steps that is available for us. Increasing this awareness, for sure. That's what Sayyid Hassan was doing, right? Increasing awareness to the different people at different levels. And at this point, I would say Sheikh mentioned the idea of social awakening, right? At the social level, when we speak about Imam Zaman and the return of Imam Mahdi, sometimes maybe we have this, again, a very surface level understanding that, everyone needs to become a Muslim and then Imam Zaman will come. No, it doesn't need to be like that, right? So we need to have this level of being able to invite people to some common ground. It doesn't always have to be Islam is like the last thing, like the final step that people will see the greatest or the final level of truth and then accept Islam. It doesn't have to be that, right? The starting point is always before that, right? So this kalima wahida today, for example, is the Palestinian cause, that you're fighting hegemonic powers, you're fighting the oppressor, right? And you're standing ground and you're helping, speaking out, creating awareness for the oppressed in whichever country you live, whichever region you live in, whatever area, whatever little means that you have, but you're speaking for the oppressed. This in itself is kalimatun wahida. So this social awareness is extremely important, and this really paves the ground for, inshallah, the zuhur of Imam Mahdi. You see that a large group or a large population of the world having agreed on certain basic human principles that are approved and pushed forward by Islam, standing against and rising against the dominating oppressive powers of the world. So this is extremely important. And then Sayyid Hassan's point about cutting off supplies, in other words, boycott.
I guess when the Arabs leaders are asked to boycott at that level, at our level,
we need to look at individuals as communities, as different communities in different parts of the world. Where are the different products and different items that we're using that are made in Israel, or they provide some sort of monetary aid to Israel? And again, it doesn't have to be, for example, changing our lifestyle completely and boycotting like 20, 30 things that we're using. No, let's identify 3, 4, 5 main items being, the ones that are like the main products of Israel, and boycotting them. And this has, so for example, if you go and look at the statistics about, for example, Starbucks, they've been saying that in the previous week, for example, their profits have reduced by 1/3 or reduced to 1/3. I don't remember the report exactly, right? So things like this, like people have realized, at least in the West,
real impact.
People in the West have realized people are letting go of their jobs in Starbucks, for example. So now this is like one of the many options, right? Like we need to identify what are the different, at least 3, 4 of the main Israeli products, and then start boycotting them.
And unfortunately, right now, boycotting is being portrayed as something anti-Semitic, and there's a lot of backlash against that. And again, that separation needs to, again, the media plays a lot of propaganda to make people, stop this. And it needs to be understood that there's nothing to do with anti-Semitism. It's literally we're doing what we can in our capacity against the oppressor.
Yeah, in fact, it's like the most peaceful way that we can think of that, like just cut off.
Yeah, stop supporting the oppression. I mean, it's not asking for too much.
The most sensible thing to do. Again, another thing that came, discussing with someone, I came to mind. Again, okay, you're not at a political level, you don't have a political platform to speak on, or make some changes in your country, but the least that you can do is, for example, local centers, local mosques, the least that they can do is have, if you can get permission for, let's say, for a small solitary march for the Palestinians, that's something that you can do in your region. If you can't do that, at least in your own center outside your mosque, you can have some banners, some posters, you can have some programs with, for example, other Muslim brothers. You can even, again, the idea of kalimatun wahida,
Bring everybody together.
You don't have to, for example, emphasize on certain specific Islamic principles and say, oh, this faction doesn't believe in that principle. But no, let's keep those on the side right now. Doesn't mean we let go of them, obviously.
Work on the commonalities rather than focus
take
on
the commonalities, invite them, have a talk on, for example, Palestine, have a talk on what Israel has done. A lot of the people are not aware of this historic background that we mentioned. Educate the people, inform the people, invite Christians to your center, for example, invite, people understand what's happening and people understand what's wrong, but people want to know. They don't always have access to the right information. Media, they don't necessarily know which platforms to follow, for example, which individuals to follow, which
help people decipher the correct information.
So the least you can do is create awareness at this level, and then you can get, this can be that opening point for you to be able to, create links with these different communities. Or even, for example, the Shias themselves, you don't have to limit yourself. Okay, Iranian Shias, for example, in a certain city will only, speak for Iranian Shias, and then you have the Afghani Shias, and you have the Pakistani Shias. No, let's have some common platforms, some common speeches, some common programs. Invite these Shia brothers together, have some common programs. Start mingling with each other, speaking about a common cause. So these are some important steps that we can take.
So inshallah, this can be a good excuse and reason for people to get together, inshallah. Hassan, thank you very much. I hope that the discussion shed some light in Sayyid Hassan's speech, and also the events that are currently happening. We really pray to Allah that this oppression comes to an end very soon. Inshallah, with the coming of the Imam and the hastened Dhuhr, inshallah, and that we are part and parcel of this movement, and that we're not seen as people who are bystanders and didn't get involved.